The economies of East Asia are slowing down, but a top World Bank economist says growth in 2012 will remain relatively robust.
Even if something bad were to happen, we do believe that East Asia, by and large, is quite well positioned to absorb fairly considerable shocks.
Bert Hofman laid out his economic view of the region during a forum jointly organized by NUS Business School's Center for Asset Management Research and Investments and Cornell University. He listed features of the regional economies that give them an edge.
Most of them have a current account surplus. Everybody has, well, almost everybody, except maybe Vietnam, has a huge amount of reserves. Fiscal deficits are not as big as in many other parts of the world. Government debts are not as high as in other parts of the world. So even if something bad happens, they can probably absorb some of the shock and they can stage some policy reaction, which a number of other countries around the world would definitely not be able to do.
But there's no escaping what Hofman calls the miseries other countries are experiencing. He notes that about 50% of East Asia's exports go to the United States, Europe, and Japan. So when those economies slow down, East Asia feels it.
For this year, we do see a slowdown, and actually for East Asia, I'm talking about developing East Asia, which includes China and Vietnam and Indonesia. It doesn't include Singapore, for instance. You see a slowdown of about a half a percentage point, from 8.4 last year to 7.8 this year, which is almost 2 percentage points lower in growth, GDP growth, than it was in 2010. So we are talking about a considerable slowdown.
He did point out that domestic demand is helping to offset the slowdown in exports in some countries. The World Bank's latest regional forecast actually shows growth accelerating in Thailand and Malaysia this year. Longer term, Hofman is very optimistic about East Asia. He's been watching the shift of economic power to developing countries, which he says is accelerating. China, for example, may be the world's second largest economy now, but it can already claim first place in a number of categories.
It is the first in international reserves. It is the first in, of course, labor force. It is the first in manufacturing. It's the first in trade now. It is the first in exports. It's the first in steel use, copper use, any natural resource use that you can imagine. China is truly enormous already in so many aspects.
Hofman left the luncheon audience something to chew on. He says China will be the world's #1 economy, but it will still be a middle-income economy that thus far has been reluctant to take on a leadership role in global crises. It will be interesting to watch how China makes the transition to what he calls a responsible stakeholder. For NUS Business School, I'm Katie Sargent.